Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where the Commander Clash crew discusses Commander-related topics. And today, we are tackling our biggest topic so far. We are going to be going through every single mono color, and we're going to be discussing what we think they are the best at. And we're going to be ranking all of them in a handy-dandy, internet-friendly tier list. So we're going to go through every single aspect that we consider pretty important in every single deck, from ramp to card draw to recursion to tutors, and we're going to be ranking every single monocolor from D, which is the lowest ranking possible, all the way up to S, which is our highest ranking possible. So today, joining me to do all this ranking and discussing what we think the colors are good and bad at is Richard, aka the Goldfish Father. How's it going, Richard?
Doing well, Tomer. I'm excited to have white dunk on all the colors today. It's finally, this has been like the entire Clash. I made the Clash podcast for this. Yeah. Back then when we talked about it, Tomer, this was it. This was the moment we're waiting for. Secret Rendezvous is finally here.
Yeah. I hope you better have S ranking for card draw for white because of Secret Rendezvous. And recurring it.
We'll see.
You better.
We'll see.
You better.
We'll see. One card does not make a whole color. One card does not make a whole color.
All right. Not a believer, I see. All right, and then next joining me is Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. Better known as Seth. I keep getting it the wrong way, maybe, I don't know.
It works either way.
How's it going?
Good. I'm glad to be here. I think this is going to be fun. This is a pretty interesting topic, I think. And maybe at the end we'll know what the best monocolor is, or at least be able to argue about what the best overall monocolor is.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting thing to see how we tackle this topic. We've played a lot of Commander Clash together. Many years. 6 years. Of Commander Clash together, so we have definitely a pretty good idea of what we consider good and bad in each respect. Generally speaking, we have Krim joining us, but he couldn't make it today, so it's just going to be the three of us, which is going to be the smallest Commander Clash podcast of all time. Just the three of us hanging out. So we'll see if that changes the dynamic at all. I think there's going to be less Grixis representation here at the table, but we'll see. We'll see what we
have
can.
His rankings.
Although,
we can't just inject words into his mouth because he's not here.
Yes. We'll just give him the reasoning for all that.
Play more removal. Green sucks. Yeah. Here's my ranking.
Repeat. Billing. All right, we did it.
So, this is going to be a long topic. We're probably going to be cutting it up into probably 2 podcasts, perhaps even 3, depending on how long we're going to be talking about each one. We're going to go pretty deep on these. But before we jump into the first category, which is going to be ramp, one thing you can do to help this podcast grow is you can like and subscribe on wherever you're listening to this podcast. If it's on Spotify, if it's iTunes, if it's on YouTube, just hit whatever the like and subscribe equivalent is on there to help the channel grow. Another way you can support the channel is you can head on over to mtggoldfishmerch.com, where you can purchase all the beautiful playmats that are stapled on Richard's wall. You can purchase deck boxes, sleeves, tokens, even clothing apparel such as t-shirts, and so much more at mtggoldfishmerch.com. All right, let's get into the rankings, and we're going to start off with ramp, which is one of the most critical things every single deck needs. You have to do it somehow. So ramp, I think for us, we're going to be defining it, and feel free to chime in on what you think. Is basically anything that can kind of accelerate your gameplay and accelerate casting your spells. So this is going to include land ramp, like rampant growth effects, mana dorks, so tap for mana discount cards, like Baral, Chief of Compliance, makes instant sorceries cheaper by 1. And what do you guys think about rituals and treasures? Would we consider that as the ramp category as well?
Yeah, close enough. I think for me, like if it's adding extra mana, I'll accept it under ramp. I think there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and different colors do it in their own kind of special ways, but I don't know, you could probably quibble and like try to separate it out into a bunch of sub-ramp categories, but I don't know. I'm fine with lumping it all together and just calling all that stuff ramp,
What about
personally.
gold tokens?
Gold tokens.
Gold,
What about the gold tokens?
Treasures
Crystal
count,
Opulence
gold does
deserves its
not.
own.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
they're all
yeah.
mana accelerants, right? Some
Yeah.
better than others, which I guess we'll talk about in our ratings. But yeah, ways to cast your spells ahead of curve.
Yes. I think that's our definition of ramp that we're going to go for. Ways of casting ahead of curve. So yeah, let's talk about our ratings. Richard, take it away. What do you have at the top and what is at the bottom?
All right. At S, we have green, the king of land ramp and creature ramp. A, I have white, the only other color that does any form of land ramp whatsoever. It has Smothering Tide as well. And then far down the pack, I put C at red and black. They mostly have the ritual type things, the treasure making, the big burst stormy things. And then D, like blue, like high tide, Baral, like that's I don't know what else you'd put in there. So yeah, that's my rankings.
Ooh, mine is kind of similar. I got green, obviously, at S tier, but then I don't have anything else until we get to B tier, because I think that green, honestly, like, I could put something in A tier, but I think green is so far ahead of everyone else in terms of how good it is at ramping. It deserves to, like, be on a pedestal all by itself in this category. So we got green at S. In B tier, I have white and black. I will talk about this, but I like black a little more than Richard does, I think, ramp-wise. Red in the C tier, and then blue down at the bottom, I think, by far the weakest of the colors. If I could, like, have an F tier, I might put blue in it, because I think there's actually, like, the gap between green and white and black, I think it's similar from red down to blue. Like, red, even though it's only one grade ahead, it's actually, like, significantly better than blue, or blue is, like, significantly worse than red when it comes to ramping.
I generally agree with that, and you kind of convinced me a little bit towards your end. I have it almost exactly as Richard. I have green at the top and top at S, and I would consider this like an S plus. Like the difference between green and the next best color is monumental. But then the next best color I would say is white at 8, and then I would have B black, C red, and finally D blue. So we've put our rankings. What do you guys think? We're pretty close. This is one where there's not too much debate. But Seth, you said that you would consider white a little bit lower than I guess Richard and I. And why is that? And you put it beside black.
So I have white a little lower than you do, and I guess black a little higher than at least Richard does. So my thinking is, yes, white can ramp now better than it could in the past. It has Smothering Tithe, which is legitimately one of the best ramp spells in the format. But then after that, a lot of its ramp is kind of catch-up ramp, the Cartographer's Hawk, and I've just seen these cards go wrong a lot of times on Commander Clash. There's times when they work out really well, but then there's also times when we see the Cartographer's Hawk just being like a 1-2 flyer that does like literally nothing because you're at the wrong seat at the table, or someone else didn't ramp so no one's ahead of you, or you didn't draw your bounce land. So I think that white's ramp is just a little inconsistent for my taste. And then black, I think that black is a little bit underrated because of how easy it is to play Cabal Coffers and Urborg in essentially any black deck, and that's just such a powerful ramp effect. And now we have like Urza Saga to find Expedition Map to tutor it up, so it's even more consistent. The other thing that black does really well is I think it might be the best late game ramp color. It's not great at ramping on like turn 1 or turn 2 or turn 3. I guess you have the mana rocks that every color has, but it's not ramping quickly in the early game. But in the late game, it has all of these swamp mana doublers. So black is the color where you can find yourself making 30, 40 mana a turn once you get a couple of these mana doublers stacked up in the late game. So even though it doesn't get off to that fast of a start ramp wise, once you get to the later turns, black can just overwhelm the table with a huge amount of mana, and then it has to pay off for the Torment of Hailfires or Exsanguinate to like close out the game once you make all this mana.
So I see what you're saying, but I don't consider that ramp. Like, ramp is supposed to accelerate your game. Like, your coffers was your end game. Like, that's your combo finish, right? Like, you might as well just put, like, an infinite mana combo and call that ramp then, right? Like, you assembled a combo and then just spiked mana considerably at, like, turn 6 or 7. You know what I mean? Like, it's not... helping you. Like, I guess the earliest you can do it is throw out a
Interesting.
Crypt Ghast, like ramp out a Crypt Ghast and untap with it and hope you're good to go. But in general, like assembling the coffers and getting enough swamps to like actually make it work and have enough lands on the battlefield, that's like a finisher, right? Like that's like an infinite mana combo or something at this point. That's not helping you accelerate your game plan.
So what's the cutoff then? Like, think of like Mindstone, Hedron Archive, Dreamstone, Hedron working up the curve. Like, is Dreamstone Hedron not ramp because it's 6 mana and it's just like too late to really accelerate your game plan? Like, does it have to be in the early game to count as ramp for you?
I think Dreamstone Hedron's a bit late, but I think like Hedron Archive is like okay, right? Like turn 4. But it's like if we were talking about burst
like
mana, then you just
Mirari's
put red on top, right? Because you would just go like Dockside Loop, turn 2, done, right? Like that's like the most accelerate you can get, but it's a one shot and it's a combo and it's also your finisher.
But okay, here's my argument. But if the idea is, and our definition is accelerating into your game plan, essentially, if your game plan's casting a huge Torment of Hailfire or a big Exsanguinate, isn't black doing that in its own maybe slower way? But it's still like meeting that criteria. I think it's still like you're getting your Exsanguinate down faster than you would have before because you have those cards.
So I'm kind of in between Richard and Seth here, where I do consider late game ramp still ramp, like Cabal Coffers, Crypt Ghast, Nirkana Revenant, Magus of the Coffers. There's a bunch in black that's really good. And then outside of that, they also have Black Market, like Death Effects. Black Market and Pitiless Plunderer are 2 other ways of generating more mana when creatures die, and that can snowball. But I do feel like as the format kind of speeds up in general, that the late game ramp cards become less potent just because, you know, if we're shaving off to an average of 2 turns from the speed of the format, if we're going from like a 12-turn game to a 10-turn game, that's going to affect black's mana ramp more than it would white, where white kind of, you know, has Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Companion and all these stuff that enter the battlefield on like turn 2 and ramp you up 1 land. I think that's really good. That's why I kind of put white a little bit ahead of black these days, just because I do value early ramp over late game ramp, but I do like black ramp. And I think the other issue with white is, it's inconsistency, where sometimes you just have a Knight of White Orchid and it doesn't ramp you, and then it's a dead card. And also the diminishing return on catch-up ramp, right? If you have too many of these effects, they're actually cannibalizing each other. Your first Loyal Warhound is good, it's more likely to be good, but then if you have another catch-up ramp like Cartographer's Hawk, that card gets worse because you have already lane ramped a little bit. And also Cartographer's Hawk, I don't think we've ever seen ramped, actually. I don't even count. I don't even count it as a ramp.
I need to get this. Okay. Like the gap between green and white is not like insurmountable. Like green is clearly better, but white is extremely good, right? Because you guys are forgetting Savine's Reclamation, Brought Back, Cosmic Intervention, like all these things that bring your fetches back, right? The ability to blink your Solemns, the ability to Sun Titan lands in, right? In addition to all your catch-up ramp, in addition to land tax making you hit every land drop, right? Because the worst thing you can do is ramp and then miss a land drop afterwards, hence like going nowhere, right? So like white like never has an issue with ramp, I don't think, right? Like yes, once in a while things blow up in your face, but you know, sometimes you have that dockside and no one has artifacts. Are you going to cut dockside? Like, no, right? Like, the upside is so strong, right? That you take the blow up sometimes.
I don't know about Sun Titan for a fetch land counting as ramp if my
drop,
mana
remember?
doublers and black don't count as ramp. I don't know about that.
Yeah,
but I do know what you're saying though. Like,
how many times do I have Ameria online when we play? Don't you notice a shocking amount of time Ameria's there? You're like, what the heck, right? How did this happen?
It takes so much work, though. Like in everything else with the white. Like, it takes a lot of effort. Like green, you're just like, oh, Kodama's Reach, Cultivate. Like, I got a million lands. When in white, it's like, I gotta have bounce lands in my graveyard. I gotta have fetch lands in my monocolor deck so then I can get it back. So, like, if you jump through the hoops,
getting Coffers,
like, it can be
Expedition
very
Map,
strong.
Orberg, and enough swamps is not enough work? Like, come on. That's a lot of work, too.
I think the gap
they're
is
pretty
big.
comparable. I think the gap between green and white, it's not even close, because like Think about the different ways green can ramp. It's not even just like, oh, I have rampant growth or whatever in every single deck. No, it's like, what's your flavor of green deck? You're going to have this repertoire of amazing, perfectly on-theme, synergistic ramp cards. Oh, you're an Enchantress deck? Well, turn 1, you can do Two-Pier Sprawl. You can Wild Growth. You can Carpet of Flowers. You can Burgeoning. You can Exploration. You're a Landfall deck? Yeah, Burgeoning, Exploration, those are great too. Ooh, my Lotus Cobra is great too. My Tireless Provisioners, crazy good too. Oh, I'm a creature-heavy deck, or I'm an Elf Ball deck. Well, turn 1 Mana Dorks galore. You're just covered for days on that.
Green is way above, right? But here's the question.
Yeah.
You're playing a different color, and you're not allowed access to green, right? And you have white. Would you play white ramp, or would you go like Mana Rocks? That is the question. Like, is it good enough for you to play the white ramp, or would you just be like, forget it, I'm playing, Signets and whatever,
oh,
right?
My opponents are green?
I'm gonna go Coffer's Plan or something, right? I'm not gonna. If you're playing Orzhov, do you bother with white ramp?
I think one of the upsides of white ramp, which you did kind of hint at, is it gets this flexible ramp that does other things. Like, even though we can quibble about Sun Titan, cards like Sun Titan, Divine's Reclamation, blinking things, like, those are cards that are relevant in other ways. Unlike something like a Rampant Growth is only always going to get you a land, Sun Titan can be getting back other things. Divine's Reclamation can be getting back other things. So I think that's the reason to play the white ramp, is that flexibility. So I think I would play the white ramp. Like, I don't think I'm just going to drop all that stuff for the Mana Rocks like I would in like a blue deck. You're kind of just, that's all you really got is Mana Rocks or bust. So I think the white ramp is good enough that I would play that over just playing the Mana Rock package.
If I'm in a 2-colored non-green deck, I'm going to be running at least like 3 good catch-up land ramp cards. Like, Night of the White Orchid is one of the best ramp cards in the format, I think. It gets you a plains, but it can be even dual plains. So you can get your, if you're in Azorius, you can get your Hallowed Fountain. And it enters the battlefield untapped, too. It's essentially a 3 visits. And it's on a body. So it's a 2/2. It can hold equipment and everything, and you can blink it for even more value. Yes, it's a little bit inconsistent. Like, sometimes you won't be able to ramp out with it, but I think the upside is so good that it's definitely worth it. And there are a couple other cards that I consider also just so good that no matter what 2-color deck I'm in, I'm going to be strongly considering adding it.
So
we didn't even mention Smothering Tide. I think Smothering Tide is one of the greatest ramp cards in the format, and it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Like, if I'm in a green deck, I'm definitely still considering Smothering Tide. I'm taking it out of my decks because I find it annoying, but
the new
that's
one
not an annoying tier list. It's a parallel tier list. What?
I got to ask you guys about some of the worst colors, because we mostly talked about the colors we have ranked highly.
Yeah.
Does blue need better ramp in Commander? Like, are we to the point where we need something for blue? Like, we've gotten more white catch-up ramp. Red has gotten all this treasure stuff recently, so it now has another pathway to ramping. Blue's got basically nothing. You got High Tide. I guess you can argue Baral if you're Spellslinger, but really it's only Mana Rocks. That's your only real option. Does blue need more ramp here? Do we need more support?
We have a color pie.
Yeah.
Like white. So white and green have been abused to heck, right? We don't need to give blue all these abilities to, like, there should be a reason to play colors, right? Like, if I play blue, the trade-off is I get no ramp, right? Like, that should be a trade-off. Like, I don't want them adding ramp or, like, they're going to add like treasures or something, right? They're going to try to start adding ramp that's effectively ramp. And then, like, colors have zero meaning in Magic, which I don't like. So I do not think they should get ramp.
I'm on the same boat. Like, I wouldn't mind a little bit of ramp, but I wouldn't want, like, very good ramp. I don't want blue to get a Smothering Tithe. But I'm okay with blue getting, like, something okay-ish. And blue does have...
Baral.
Yeah, another Baral. Like, Barals are fine, whatever. What are the best blue ramp sources in our tables? High Tide's very good. Yeah, High Tide's amazing.
Candelabra.
High Tide's also kind of similar to
that's very
black
late game,
ramp, too. Yeah, it's very. It's a
you can get value.
doubler.
You can like turn 2, well, not maybe turn 3 High Tide and get some value out of it. Where you can't like really turn 3 black value. But yeah, you want to do it late.
Yeah, you have Dark Ritual. That's like literally just a Dark Ritual. At that point.
You have the rituals of black, but I meant coffers.
Yeah.
But yeah, black has the actual rituals before red took
Blue.
over.
What else
Blue
is
has
there
the
in
best
blue?
artifact tutors.
Nothing.
So
Artifact
blue can
tutors.
cast. Yeah, blue can cast Trinket Mage, which will fetch up your Sol Ring or your Mana Crypt. And it also has like Whir of Invention. Like I could see like triple blue Whir of Invention, get your Mana Crypt is good. But that's not like so much blue.
So
It's
blue
just like
has
the
mana cheating
including-
spells like Amanatu's
Yeah.
Augury. I guess red has
Yes.
this too, right? Where you just cast something and then you get to like use like infinite mana, like Omniscience. Right? Something
Omniscience.
like
That's
that. But
is Omniscience ramp.
No.
it's your finisher, right? Theoretically,
Yeah.
it's ramp, but like it's really your finisher that you're building towards. Same with Amanatu's Augury, right? It's really your finisher, but like that's how they cheat on their mana to, play the big spells, right?
So there's also going to be one person in the comment section who's going to be typing Dreamscape Artist, and I said this a decade ago, and I'll keep saying it. The Dreamscape Artist is trash.
Wait, what is that?
It's so
I
bad.
like Dreamscape Artists.
Wait,
You get
what
to
is this?
Okay, you pay mana,
Okay, Dreamscape
discard a
Art-
card, sack a land, and Harrow essentially.
Yeah,
on a
that
2
sounds
mana
good on
blue
paper.
creature. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a 2-mana blue creature.
Not bad.
Doesn't have haste or anything. It has summoning sickness. Then you have to pay 3 mana, discard a card, and Harrow. You get to search 2 basics, and you have to sacrifice a land. So you're up one basic land.
But you had to discard a card.
So you're
And you have to
breaking
discard a
even
card, yeah.
card
Doesn't count.
advantage
No,
wise.
yeah, no, this doesn't count.
No, this is a 2-for-1 for yourself. It's a Harrow that you had to spend an extra card for.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like a 2 for 2, right? Because you get 2 lands and you like spend a land and a card. So you're kind of
That's like saying Harrow's a 2-for-1.
You're essentially
'cause you went
turning,
up a
like-
land.
yeah, okay.
You're playing
It's
a land
so
from
bad.
hand, essentially, right? It's costing you a card in hand to.
Basically,
It's a
you're
spell
turning a,
shaper, so it
No,
it
they
turns a-
have like dorks that tap that can pay for instants
is
and
awful.
sorceries.
I think there's an
Yeah,
artifact
are some,
one too.
There are some blue
yeah.
mana dorks, but
There's like something curious homunculus taps for
Yeah.
instant sorcery mana. There's a couple. There's like also Ethereum Sculptor makes your artifacts cost 1 less, but like all of them are pretty narrow. I would say they're narrow and they're not like astounding. I think High Tide's probably the best out of the best, but you have to be super committed. You have to be like your lane base has to be like really heavy on islands, and we don't have an Urborg for blue yet, right? So you need to be mono blue for High Tide to be.
no one's saying I'm adding blue to my deck because I need ramp. Okay.
Yeah.
No one is thinking of blue when they're doing this.
I
Okay,
do.
what about red? Sorry, go ahead.
But really quick, I just want to play devil's advocate. Even though I agree with you about not having the color pie matter, I do wonder if part of the reason we see so many Simic decks is because blue doesn't have ramp. So it's very easy to be like, oh, I want to play these blue cards, but I need ramp. So people just like play all the green Simic cards, and then you end up with I think Simic is the most I would say the most popular two-color combination in Commander. So you end up with all these Simic decks that eventually kind of look the same and get unfun to play against because they're all just like doing the same thing, ramping to play blue spells and drawing a ton of cards. So I do wonder if blue had better ramp, if maybe we'd see slightly less Simic going around. Not that I'm advocating for breaking the color pie, but that would be my devil's advocate argument for giving blue at least a little bit more ramp so it doesn't have to reach into green to feel like it can keep up with other colors.
I'm going to play the Crim card here. Blue needs help, okay? Blue, I think if you actually look at these rankings, they're actually low in a lot of categories, but I don't know if breaking color pie is it, right? Because if you give it all of its shortcomings, then it suddenly just becomes the best color, right? So that's the problem, right? Like it has clear strengths and weaknesses, and then if you start filling them in, now you don't have to play green. You can just play anything you want now, right? Blue with whatever color you want, because you don't need to force green in for ramp. So I don't like that necessarily, but who knows? It's WotC. We're definitely getting blue ramp. It's coming.
I'm okay shortening the gap between the best and the worst. Like yeah, white. Like we
Double
talked about
catch
how
up. You have
white.
to be 2 lands behind.
No,
How
but
do you
like
make it worse?
so I know we don't all love treasures. However, I think blue is the primary color for artifacts. I think it's cool if they got to make a little bit of treasures, but not the crazy cards. Like I don't want blue to get a Smothering Tithe because I think that's too much. But I think there's some middle ground between a Smothering Tithe and like something that's acceptable in blue that still wouldn't be as good as. Yeah, it would be impossible to make blue as good as green in terms of ramping. That's just not possible. We have like too many years of Magic green getting good ramp to ever make up that difference. But I don't know, like something that can like make treasures in a normal amount, maybe capped at like 3 treasures per turn
I know how to
cycle or
fix
something.
it. Land stealing. 2 mana, gain control of target basic land.
They already have Annex.
It's
actually
like
a pretty
5
good
mana,
card.
though,
They have
isn't it?
Thieving
It's
Skydiver
4.
as well to steal mana rocks. So like maybe you just steal lands off other people.
Well,
Would
there's
people
also
get
like
salty?
Archmage's Charm.
Yes.
I like that card a lot. Oh, Thieving Skydiver is also
Yeah.
kind of like, it's basically, Blue's really good at stealing other people's Sol Rings. Like that's what Blue's really good at. Like Thieving Skydiver is legit. 3 mana, have a body, and you steal a Sol Ring. 3 mana Archmage's Ascension is either draw 2 cards, counter spell, or steal a Sol Ring. Essentially, it's steal a artifact mana value 1 or less.
I think it's actually
So,
any permanent mana value 1 or less, non-land permanent.
Oh,
so
wow.
you can steal a
So you
mana
can get a
dork
token
too,
and stuff.
Birds of Paradise or something. As far as red, you asked about red. Red is like the weirdest ramp color for me. Like, it's really powerful, but it's also really temporary. I think Dockside kind of breaks this mold a little bit in treasures because you can store them up. Although it does kind of feel red, but traditionally red is like the ritual color. So red is really, really the best at making a huge burst of mana on 1 turn with a Mana Geyser or a Seething Song or a Jeska's Will, where all of a sudden you just like jump super far ahead, but you got to be able to take advantage of that mana in 1 turn. I think actually that's a pretty red way to ramp, and I like that. It's unique among the colors, it's very impulsive, and kind of fits red's color pie. I think the problem with treasures is it kind of breaks that because you can store them up. Like, that's kind of the problem. Dockside looks like a ritual, but it's a ritual that lets you keep the mana. Could you imagine if Mana Geyser, like, the mana didn't empty from your mana pool at the end of turn of phases or something? Like, that's essentially what Dockside does for 2 mana. So I like the ritual ramp, but it is, again, kind of like very niche. Like, for Storm decks, it's a late game plan where you're setting up your finisher with a Mana Geyser to storm off or to win the game with 1 big spell. Not very consistent, though, in the way that something like green is, where on turn 2, I get an extra land. On turn 3, I get an extra land, and you slowly build up those resources.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I'm building like a mono red deck, I'm almost exclusively playing mana rocks, like colorless options to ramp. The things that off the top of my head, like if I played a lot of Dockside would be number 1 on the list, obviously. I would skew red's contribution in terms of ramp in this category a lot. Then beyond that, like, yeah, Mana Geyser's pretty good. It's mid-game, mid to late game-ish, you know? Like, that's when it really shines the most. Another card that I like a lot in red is, like, Runaway Steam Kin, which whenever you cast a red spell, you give a counter on it, and then you can remove 3 and make 3 mana. That's kind of good.
What about
And
your
there's, like, a bunch
treasure
of
thing?
Planeswalkers.
What about your
Curse of
treasure?
Opulence.
Your treasure
Oh,
thing
yes.
that you love?
The greatest red ramp of all. It kills an opponent while you're ramping.
Right. Okay, so Stormkill Artist is actually probably the second best red card, I would say, for ramp. It's limited to Spellslinger. Like, if you're not heavy on instants and sorceries, it doesn't do much, but it makes an instant sorcery whenever you cast or copy it makes a treasure token whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, and it grows its power based on the number of artifacts you control. So I actually have just died to combat damage to Stormkill Artist. It's happened to me before. But the amount of mana it generates in a Spellslinger deck is bananas. It's probably the best ramp card in a Spellslinger deck.
Also, like,
But it is-
Burgie.
I mean,
Burgie
if
does
we count
something similar.
treasures, I would put red above black. Like, red makes a ton, like, outside of Dockside, red makes a ton of treasures and is extremely good at making treasures. So I would actually throw it above black. It's like very consistent.
Ooh.
Like, between Curse of Opulence, like Magda,
Curse of
Facebreaker
Opulence,
or
my
whatever,
baby.
the new Capenna cards, like the dragons, like there's so much Naheb, you know, the damage, making mana things, right? Mana Geyser, stuff like that. So if you count the burst, and if you ever play Storm, right, you have to play red.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have to cast all your rituals into recur all your rituals to get the big burst of mana. So I would probably move it above black if we want to count those. The problem I have with these cards is they're very specific. Like, if you play Storm, great. But if you're trying to play a fair deck, like, what are you going to do with these rituals? Like, they're, like, horrendous in your deck, right? So it's kind of like all in on Storm or nothing, right? So that's the problem with the red ramp.
Yeah, I feel like red might be like one of the most improved colors over the last couple of years just because it's gotten so many strong treasure cards, and that's really change the equation of how red ramps, like from having just the rituals and the mana rocks to actually having this whole other avenue for ramping. Also, red's another really good artifact color as far as finding artifacts, reanimating artifacts, synergizing with artifacts. So similar to what we were talking about with blue, maybe it gets like every color can use mana rocks, but I think red can use mana rocks alongside blue better than most colors. So it gets a little bump there.
Yeah, I think treasures are most powerful in those two colors because those are the primary artifact colors. So I like treasures for that. But yeah, I don't want more dock sides. But I do think, yeah, if you're counting treasures and you're counting rituals, red's pretty decent. But yeah, it is still a little bit more narrow than, you know, our top two contenders, I guess. Especially green. Green is just so much ahead.
Like, the other thing, just speaking of green being so far ahead, like, there's just so much of it. If you look at like these other colors, like red, if you take away Dockside, its whole ranking would get a lot worse because that card's so strong. Or white, if you took away Smothering Tithe, I think that the whole color ranking would get a lot worse because that card is so powerful. If you took away the 10 best green ramp cards, it would still be the best ramp color by like a pretty big margin because it's just like so far ahead there.
Yeah. It's funny because we were talking how, like, well, like, black has late game ramp, but, like, when you compare that to green even, like, you know, green has the mana reflection, green has the Zenith Cursor, it can do the same mana doubling as the other colors, but just better.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
But it also gets mana dorks,
like
and it also gets rampant growth, and it also, like, other than lacking the burst ritual mana, like, it just it does it all. Also worth mentioning, I think Crim's, we have Crim's ratings, even though he's not here. He rated it exactly the same as Tomer did, actually. Green at S, white at A, black at B, red at C, and then blue down at the bottom at D. So actually exactly the same as Tomer and very similar to the rest of us.
All right. I guess that covers ramp. That was category number 1. And then we're going to move on to another thing that, you know, every single deck needs, regardless of what your goal is, and that's going to be card draw. So this is going to be a little bit harder to define because there's going to be a lot of nuance in this discussion. But I think personally that card draw, if I would define it, or card advantage, if you will, I'm basically looking for cards that net more than one card in hand. You know, like you spend a card to generate at least 2 or more cards into your hand, or like value in some sort, like netting multiple cards for the cost of one. What do you guys think about that?
I would basically agree with that. Things that take one card and turn it into more than one card is kind of the basis of card advantage. So I think I can get behind that definition.
I'll throw some asterisks in there.
Yeah.
Because like basically everything in Magic generates card advantage. So it becomes very hard to list that. So for me, I put card draw as like things that literally put more additional cards in hand and not like, you know, effective cards like, you know, doubling triggers or something like that, right? But we can talk about that. Yeah, like
a 2-for-1 removal spell isn't card draw.
I mean, but that's card advantage, right?
It's card advantage, yeah. So we're focusing on card draw. So things that net 2 or more cards into your hand. And we're going to talk about like, we're going to be talking about other aspects like recursion, for example, is going to be coming up. We'll talk about cards that can net multiple cards from the graveyard onto the battlefield, for example. But we're going to be focusing specifically on cards that net multiple cards, 2 or more cards into your hand. So that's our card draw. Richard, what are your ratings for these?
All right. I have at S tier, we have blue. At A, green and black. At B, white. And then at D, at the bottom, no man's land, we got red.
Wow. Oh, wow. Weird. That is hot. That is spicy. I like it.
My rankings.
We'll get to it after Seth and you guys go over your ratings.
Mine start looking like Richard's. I got blue at S tier. I actually have green and black at A tier. I got nothing at B tier. And then both white and red in C tier. And then nothing at D tier. So that's how I broke it down.
Okay. So for me, I have at S blue, at A I have green, at B I have black, at C I have red, and then finally at D I have white.
Whew.
And then we also have Crim's colors.
Yeah, we got Crim. So Crim has green at S tier, and then blue, black at A tier, red at B tier, and white at C tier.
Mm-hmm.
So
really has green up
you
there.
three basically kind of agree. Flipping, so Krim puts green ahead, which I think I know why he's doing that, and then you guys are pretty much the same on the bottom pack as well.
Yeah. So we're not too far off from each other, let's be honest. Like, it's not like a complete reversal, but we do disagree on like one or two colors, right? Like that's where we're really at.
How can you have red so low, Richard? How can you possibly have red be D tier and have a huge gap between the
Red doesn't draw cards, it impulse draws, right? And impulse draw is great when you storm off, and then that's it. So if you play storm, this is great, but if you don't storm, like, do you want to play with your hand open and everyone sees your cards and you're stolen goodsing, like you're stealing from other people's decks? Like, this doesn't further your game plan. That's like you can't Wheel of Fortune in here. Like, that's like only thing that literally draws cards in red, right?
I don't even like Wheel of Fortune.
I don't like it either. I think
like
red is like severely lacking in card draw. Like, you cannot store up cards to execute a game plan. You kind of need to just storm off and, you know, like burst it all out and win right there.
I gotta disagree.
What's the good card draw? What's the good card draw?
The impulse draw. Red draws with impulse draw, but red is good at drawing with impulse draw. And I think going back to like the color pie thing, I think it's a very red way to draw. I don't know if we want red to be storing up cards like a blue control deck. I think it's very flavorful that red has a lot of ways to access extra cards, but only get to use them for that one turn typically, or sometimes until the end of your next turn. So it comes with this time frame, but I think the cards that do that are actually pretty good and rapidly improving. Red has a lot of like 1 mana draw 2s, 2 mana draw 2s now, which is pretty above the curve if you're willing to deal with the timing restriction, essentially. If you're okay with dealing with the limited amount of time, then it's, I think, actually a pretty strong card draw color. And then you also have all the wheels on top of that, which I like wheels more than most people. But there's a lot of ways, if you're playing aggressive, you can empty your hand and kind of turn that into card advantage. I know if everyone has 7 cards in hand, whatever, it's not great. But if you can dump your hand quickly and then use it to refill, it is putting more cards into your hand with 1 card, which is kind of our definition of card advantage. And Fire Gambit. You only got to win 9 coin flips or something, and then you got them.
Yeah, just get a Croc's Thumb, or you don't even need it. Didn't somebody win without Croc's Thumb one time?
I feel
Phil
like
did.
or maybe it was Phil. Yeah.
I think card advantage in red is not like anything crazy, but it's very solid. Like, I remember I gave Seth. I had a Belborca deck for a while, and I gave Seth the chance to run it for that Commander Clash episode. He was drawing a ton of cards. Like, there was just a ton of impulse draw, and it got like this Tectonic Giant at 4. Whenever it attacks or is targeted, you get to, you know, impulse draw 2. There's like Magmatic Channeler at 2. There's all this different Chandras that impulse draw as well. There's instant speed draw, like Channel Magma or something like that, where you can, it's a big X spell. It's like their version of Stroke of Genius. There's a lot of different ones. And then, yes, there are also the wheel effects, like Magus of the Wheel and stuff. That is pretty good.
It's so bad that it goes negative. You know why it goes negative?
Wow.
Because you impulse draw, and then you get a card off the top. You're like, I must spend it. I must use this removal spell on something because I just drew it. And then you waste mana removing something you didn't need to remove, right? Because you have to play the card this turn.
And there's a lot of ones.
It's going negative for you.
But there's also a lot of impulse draw these days that also are till your next turn's end step. Like Light Up the Stage and Reckless Impulse was the latest one. I think it came out in Crimson Vow. Those ones are, you can cast it on your turn, and then you can cast it on your next turn as well. And then after that turn, then they go away.
So
that's
would
like
you
get
play
2 turns.
red card draw if you were playing with any other color?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, it's better
like
than
white.
Yeah. Or like on par with white.
Look, remember when I was drawing so many cards with the Helia deck, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, Tomo, you're drawing so many cards." Even with that, I've drawn a lot of cards with white in my day. I still put it at lowest, even below red.
I can't believe you play
that.
so much white. You draw so much cards. You have such a high win percentage with white, and you're like, white can't draw cards.
No, white can draw cards. White is good at drawing cards. I'll say white is good at drawing cards, but it's still the worst.
D is not. So to me, B is like playable and happy. Like C and D are like, get this out of here. Like I don't really want this.
You know
what?
I'll put. No, because I think black is better than red in card draw, so I don't want to lump them in the same thing. D doesn't mean it's bad. D just means it's the worst for me.
It's gotta be like super narrow or something. Like in desperate times, you played it and it's like playable, right? But if you're happy to put it in your deck, I wouldn't call it a D.
So here's the thing with white card draw for me. White card draw requires very specific hoops to jump through in order to draw cards efficiently. That's the key word, efficiently. Like I consider Dawn of Hope, which is the life gain card draw, as garbage. Like D tier, because every single time you draw a card, every single time you gain life, you have to gain life first. Then when you gain life, you can draw a singular card for 2 mana, which is just too high of a rate that I ever really want to ever pay for.
Yeah, but
I think
no
White's
plays
best
that card
draw.
right?
Yeah,
like
White's best card draw.
Mentor of the week.
Welcoming Vampire is good, but Welcoming Vampire, odds are, is just going to be a Phyrexian Arena. It's going to draw you a singular card every single turn cycle. I like that you don't have to pay mana for it. I like that it's on a 3-mana creature. But at the end of the day, it's just drawing you a singular card for jumping through a minor hoop. Mentor of the Meek, same thing. Minor hoop, you still have to jump through that hoop. You have to be in a specific type of white deck, and you still have to pay mana for it. Again, like, that's fine, but like compared to what other colors get to do in terms of card draw, it's just so far behind. It's good. I like it. I will run it and I'll be happy about
That's
it.
That's why white is B for me, and then green and black is above it, and then blue is above that, right? But I would like be very happy to play white card draw, and they have enough key cards that I would play mixed with the other colors as well, right? Like a single card, like maybe Secret Rendezvous.
So much higher than red?
Because red is Storm, right? Red is like Storm. You have to impulse and go off right there, right? And there's no game plan. Everything is exposed. Like, it's not what you really want, right?
I can see how red does not... Red card draw doesn't seem to fit Richard's play style. Richard wants to have like the cards in hand and lay back and not draw attention. And red, the impulse draw is going to force you to be doing things and making moves that maybe you don't want to be making right now. So I can see why Richard ranks it so low. Although for me, like, I don't know. I think they're very comparable. When you consider the hoops that white has to jump through to draw cards, I don't think that's much different than red having a timing restriction on drawing cards. Red draws cards easily, but you got to use them right away. Like, you just have cards that are just, hey, draw an extra card every turn, draw an extra card every turn. White, you got to jump through some hoops or be like an artifact deck or an enchantment deck or some specific archetype. But you get to hold them in your hand. So for me, those kind of end up equaling out to be at the same tier, I think. I don't know. Maybe I should bump it up to B tier. I could, whatever. I think they're at the bottom together in one way or another. But
okay, I got an interesting one for you. I'm going to put on my Crim hat. Is green better than blue at card draw? So if we're talking about burst card draw at efficiency, green is king, right? Because green has like the Toski effects where you go wide and draw a ton of cards. And it has the... really efficient tall effects. Draw cards based on creature's power, and everything in green has like 1 billion power. Is it actually better than blue at drawing cards? Like, we just played a game. You saw me like draw my whole deck or something with green. Very efficiently.
You didn't do it with black or red cards. You did it all with green.
Yeah,
you were
all
like,
with green,
sacrifice, right? Draw 18 cards.
Exactly. So is it actually better than blue?
I don't think so. Like, green is certainly powerful, but blue also has Toski effects. So I think, Toski is probably the best of those effects, but you can kind of consider that a wash.
Blue doesn't want to play creatures usually. Green does, right?
And then blue also burst draws, but you don't have to have a creature. Like, there's more risk in setup required with the green draw. Yeah. When blue, you can just Blue Sun Zenith or Even the Odds or whatever big spell and draw a whole bunch of cards. So I think that blue still ranks a little bit ahead, but green's definitely jumped up the rankings.
Green has to jump through a very small hoop and then gets rewarded immensely. Like, we saw that with the Richard game. Like, there's so many cards that are just like, draw 15 for minimal effort. Like, if you go wide, you got Toski, you got Shamanic Revelation, you got Camaraderie, you got a bunch of stuff. You got, and then incremental draw, you got Guardian Project, you got Beast Whisperer. All you have to do is you have to cast creatures, and lots of them. And green is all about that. No matter what type of creature deck you are, green is going to reward you by refilling your hand and then some by spending like 4 mana. And it's very easy to do. There might be some decks that aren't creature heavy in green, where the green card draw is now no longer that good, but it's minimal, but it's there. Whereas blue, like, I don't need to have a board state, I don't need to do anything, and I'm going to draw a billion cards off Ristic Study. I'm going to draw a billion cards off like Recurring Insight. You know, like, as long as you have cards in your hand, like 5 or more, I'm going to draw 5, and then I'm going to rebound it and draw 5 again for 6 mana. And there's a lot of just different options like that, where, like, there's no hoops. You just draw a lot of cards very efficiently. And then if you are in a very specific archetype, blue will always have something to help you along the way. Your Go Wine, here's your Coastal Piracy effect. Your Spellslinger, oh, well, here's your Archmage Emeritus. You know, like, there's something for every blue deck. And there's also for generic decks as well.
Plus,
I think I agree with you guys, but they're pretty close. I think they're actually kind of close, though. I see where Krim is going with this. He's not completely insane with this. I will note that green has unconditional card draw, right? It has Harmonize. It has Sylvan Library. It has, like, the virtual cards. Like, Kodama's Reach is actually card draw, right? You realize you drew a card into hand, right? So it actually does have, like, additional, like, non-creature-based card draw. But yeah, like, blue, like, has card draw everything. Like, if you get some bulk common somewhere, they draw cards, right? So, like,
that's the thing. Yeah.
Blue can draw cards no matter what your budget is as well. It requires no setup, but
and
green is getting there.
Any flavor too. Do you want to be draw go? Well, blue's got you covered. You know, like, do you want to be whatever? Blue's got you covered. You want to be generic? Then blue's got you covered. But green is like, you gotta be creatures. But like, every single deck is a creature deck, so it's like, oh well, good job for meeting that requirement. Here's 15 cards for 4 mana. It's like, okay, fine.
Should black be in this conversation too? If we're debating these cards at the top of our rankings, like, black, you get consistent card draw like Phyrexian Arena, giving you cards each turn. You get burst card draw like Necropotence or other, like, X draw spells. You have the cheap, like, Sign in Blood effects, Painful Truth style effects that can just refill your hand early. So it does have a wide variety. Most of it comes attached with losing life. But if you just look at efficiency, black's got draw 3 for 3, draw 5 for 5, and Promise of Power, along with things that scale throughout the game and can give you huge bursts of card advantage at once. Why isn't this also in our conversation for what should be at the top of our rankings here? Like, what's wrong with black? Are we underrating it?
I think green is bad. I think black is just like bad blue in this respect. It doesn't have, like, the top end burst, right? Yeah. So it has the efficient low end card draw, but so does blue, right? And so does green. But it doesn't have, like, that massive, like, I spend 5 mana, draw a billion cards. But it's close. It's, like, kind of up there, but I would say green and blue are ahead of it. And you know, you have to pay life, which is actually something, right? Like, you know, you're dying as you do it, because you're wasting time drawing cards, right? If you're drawing cards, you're not deploying a board, so it doesn't help that you're going down in life total while you're doing this, right? So that has a cost.
That's why I rank it lower than blue and green, is because blue, I feel like black does similar to blue. It can draw a bunch of cards. Like, Necropotence is one of the best draw spells in the format. You could just pay 3 mana, draw as much as you want. But the life loss does limit you a bit and does make it so that it is a little bit more risky, because if you do draw 15 cards off Necropotence, now you're 15 life lower, and your opponents are all going to be like, all right, let's see, do we have enough damage together to just kill them on their turn, on this turn cycle? So that can backfire a lot. I think black's also really good at drawing cards when it's involving sacrifice. Like, you have, not Pitiless Plunderer, but you have, like, Grim Horror Specs. You have a lot of creatures that essentially, like, a Smothering Abomination. You have a lot of creatures that say, like, when a creature you control dies, or when a creature dies, draw a singular card. And I think those are really, really good, and they usually don't have loss of life attached to it, because you have to jump through a hoop to get them. But it's just a green draws 15 and you're off a single creature, and you're drawing 1 off each creature that dies. And I think it's good. It is really good. And you have generic options like Siphon Mine and Necropotence and whatnot. It's just that blue's better at the generic stuff and green's better at the specific. And being, like, kind of meh at both is it's good, but it's not as good as those two, I think, in my opinion.
The creature cards kind of remind me of like reverse white cards almost. White gets to like draw when creatures come into play. Black gets to draw when they leave play. And I think those cards are pretty strong, but you're probably right. It does rank a bit behind in the life. If you're casting a lot of these spells, it does add up. Like, you might not realize it every game, but that one you're taking from a Phyrexian arena, eventually after 8 turns, all of a sudden that's 8 life, and that might be the difference between you surviving that attack on turn 8 and, you know, dying or whatever on turn 10. Or so yeah, it is a drawback. But usually you can have a hand of cards in black. Like, it's not too hard to keep your hand full, unlike some of the other colors that are a little riskier.
Painful truth is still the truth, I think. So,
you don't want to lose life. I have a card for you. It's in white. It does the same thing.
No,
I'm surprised.
Never.
I'm surprised Richard didn't have White Ranked higher just because of Secret Rendezvous.
It's a really good card, but like I put B as like good, right? Like, I'm happy to play it, but clearly the other 3 colors are above it. But I don't think it's unplayable like people are saying. Like, I don't know about Tomer and his D here for a white card draw. Like, that seems far stretched. Like, you know, blue ramp is D. Is white card draw D? Like, I don't know about that, right? That seems a little weird.
So I don't know how to rank it then, because I consider it the worst of the colors, but I don't consider it, you know, bad. I think it's good, and it's right where it should be.
That's why we allow multiple rankings in the same tier.
But I don't think it's as good as the other ones.
Like, I like to show the gap between the colors.
It's all relative. It's a D, relatively speaking. That's how I see it. I would still play it. I still like it. Okay. One other thing for red though. What do you think about, like, we talked about impulse draw, but what about like looting effects? Especially in 2022 when we have stuff like Bag of Holding, and we had that new construct from Kamigawa that lets you play the card impulsively if you discard a card. Dude, does that open up new card draw avenues for red that you think is good?
So looting and rummaging is not card advantage based by our definition. You're ending up with the same amount of cards or down cards. So I think in general we shouldn't count them as card draw, although there are combos with them that can turn them into card draw. If you're, you know, discarding something, discarding a squeeze that's going to come back to your hand, you're like kind of generating card advantage. But for the sake of simplicity, I think of them as their own thing and don't think of them in the card advantage category, at least in most decks. There's some specific decks that break that mold, but not most decks.
People play those cards wrong, actually. So they get it from 1v1 where your curve stops at like 4, so you have all its excess lands. You pitch the lands, draw new cards. That's like great, right? So people play Faithless Looting all over the place. But in Commander, you want to hit all of your land drops. You don't want to miss a land drop because your spells are generally more expensive, and that's just recasting your Commander. So unless you're actually like land taxing or something and then pitching those with Faithless Looting, I feel like, you know, it's just card selection, and most of the time you don't want it. Like, you should just play the tutor, right? Like, this doesn't really help you, and it's not card advantage per se. Like, there are no dead cards really in Commander. Like, you will need your lands eventually.
Right, but what about, well, I think Faithless Looting is usually really good for like setting up your animation. Like,
yeah. Like, you're not using it for the card draw.
Yeah.
You're using it for the fill your graveyard part of it, right?
But what if you pair it with something that turns it into card draw, like Containment Construct? Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. If you do, you may play that card this turn. I think there's like 3. There's Bag of Holding. There's one from Strixhaven that does the same thing. There's Containment Construct.
Get 2-card combo to draw cards, though. Like what?
Yeah, but you're talking about Spirited Companion and Blink effects for card draw.
It cycles
so I think
itself by itself, right?
I mean, yeah, that is generating card advantage, but I feel like that's not something that's of a power level you can just play in every deck. Like, if you're playing some sort of madness deck or something on theme, but I don't think those cards are to the point where it's like every red deck I'm going to play Containment Construct and Faithless Looting, and that's going to be my way to generate card advantage. Like, I'm not at that point yet, at least.
You know, like, there's like Goblin card draw or something, like, great, right? But like, it's so specific. Like, I would not count it. Like, yes, you can combo together and build a nice synergistic deck, but like, would you just randomly throw it in a deck that has red in it?
I feel like give it like 2 more years, and this will be like Faithless Looting will be considered like a card draw staple because of just all these effects.
Definitely
We need
possible.
a couple more.
Maybe that's how Wizards gets the red card draw, right? Like looting with something that like reduces the downside of looting.
And Faithless Looting's great. It's just not technically generating card advantage,
Yeah.
but it serves a
Yeah,
ton of purposes in a lot of different decks.
Yeah, it's card disadvantage by itself. Okay. All right, so we covered ramp. We covered card draw. Now let's talk about recursion. So basically, recursion we're going to define as anything that lets you access cards in your graveyard, or a graveyard, I guess. So like effects like regrowth, abilities that can like return a card from your graveyard to your hand, abilities that can return cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, stuff that can recur itself, like flashback or self-recurring creatures, reanimation, like stuff that will just like put a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. What do we all think about that, Richard?
All right. At S, I have black and green. At A, I have white and red. And then going all the way down to D, I have blue.
Wow! Wowee!
I don't know. Are there cards I'm missing? I don't know. Okay, you guys can fill me in on this.
No respect for the Snapcaster Mage?
Okay,
This one-
I get Snapcaster it is.
This one was tricky at the top. I have just black at S tier, and then I have green and white in A tier, and then I have red in B tier, and then all the way down at D, I also have blue hanging out all by itself, Richard style.
I'm gonna make a little change. I think you kind of convinced me on something, but not everything.
Why
There we go.
Tomer's making his change. Crim has black at S tier, green at A tier, white at B tier, and blue and red at C tier.
All right. So for me, I made a little change on the bottom ones, but the top ones remain the same. S, black. A is green. B is white. And then I had it before. C is blue and D was red, but I swapped it. Now C is going to be red and D is going to be blue. We're kind of close. We just kind of like smushed some of our rankings together a little bit, right? But the general vibe is similar.
Yeah, so for me, I really struggled with whether I should put green up with black in S tier because I love my Eternal Witnesses, and it's one of the only colors that is able to just like get any card back from the graveyard really efficiently. I also initially had red ranked really low, but then I thought more about it, and I remembered that even though red doesn't have a lot of recursion, it does have a few just like incredibly strong recursion pieces like Underworld Breach. So basically Underworld Breach and like Past in Flames by itself caused me to like bump up the rating a little bit. When initially I had it, I thought, okay, red and blue, they're bad because all it can really do is get back a spell, and even then it's not always all that efficient, get back an instant or sorcery. But then I remembered that red actually had those like couple of really busted cards that probably should bust
red
it,
for you.
Bump it up.
Underworld Beach, Past in Flames, Mizzix's Mastery.
That's the one.
Right? Like those three, like red is just the storm color. Like everything comes back to like these storm cards. They're really good. And you can actually make use of them in non-storm decks, at least Underworld Breach, right? So I think red deserves to be higher than like C or D, but it does fit just one archetype, Storm. So I do agree with you there. I actually put green as the highest. So black clearly is good at reanimating creatures, but I think that's an archetype, right? Green is good at reanimating your win con, right? So whatever it is you're trying to do in your deck, right? If it gets removed, you can regrowth it, you can Skullwinder it, you can Eternal Witness it, you can Seasons Pass, like all these cards, you can get back anything you need to, redeploy your win con. So I put that higher than like just, Entomb, reanimate something, right? Like, yes, that's strong, but that's like one deck. So I put green high because of that reason.
I agree with you, although it is worth mentioning, black does have Yagwill, which kind of does the Past in Flame, get back everything. So not a ton of cards that do that, but there are technically black cards that can do what the green and red cards do. Plus, it's just so efficient at reanimating creatures compared to every other color. Like, no other color is Entomb, Reanimate, get a huge thing on turn 2, and doing those crazy shenanigans. Plus, it has a lot of just, like, grindy, slow, get a creature back to my hand type stuff. So even though it is a little bit limited to creatures, it's just so good at recurring creatures that I haven't ranked really highly. Although, I do agree, like, Eternal Witness, Regrowth, those style effects, there are staples. I want those in every single deck that are in their colors, because just exactly like you said, being able to get back a win con or something that's dealt with or ends up getting milled is super, super important in Commander.
I'm much the same. I value black so highly just because black's recursion often just puts it directly onto the battlefield, and it kind of counts as like almost like you're ramping out creatures, right? Because you have like animate that, you have reanimate. You're not just returning it to hand and then recasting it for its mana cost, you're actually cheating on its mana. And black has so many ways of doing that. And if you do want to return it back to your hand, black does have stuff like that too, with Phyrexian Reclamation. Black also has really good reanimation finishers, like Rise from the Dark Realms, where you can get all the creatures from everybody's graveyard back. Animate Dead's also flexible, where you can get other people's creatures from their graveyards for 2 mana. Same with Necromancy and stuff like that. So it's just the fact that it's like, it's not only recursion, but it also is recursion plus like a mana discount. It's like an accelerant in that regard. So I really like black for that. Green obviously is so flexible, and green also has a way of like cheating stuff onto the battlefield too, but it's mostly just lands, I think. Like Splendid Reclamation, they have a couple of those effects where it says like return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield, and those effects are really strong, especially if you're like self-milling yourself, or you just have a lot of fetch lands. You can just go like, whoops, all that stuff is now back on the battlefield, and it's essentially a ramp. So that's really good. And then I think like white obviously has Sun Titan and has Seven's Reclamation, and it has, I don't know, those are just really good cards, I guess. So those are up there.
Brought back.
I think I would put
the restore things that died this turn.
You know what? I'm gonna put red above white. Actually, red's the Underworld Breach is such a bonkers card, and I don't even just run in Storm decks. I would put it basically in any deck because you can get any permanent type, and you can cast spells repeatedly too. Oh.
I mean, it's floor. It's kind of like a red Eternal Witness almost. Like, it can be that card that just, like, lets you get back that important piece that got milled. And red is really bad at that. Although, I was going to say I think we might be underrating white, honestly. Like, I think white is better at recurring than it's giving credit for. Sure, you got the Sun Titans and the Sevine's Reclamation and whatnot, but then you also got a lot of mass reanimation for artifacts and enchantments and planeswalkers. Just, like, get this all back. And then you got a pretty good creature reanimation. Karmic Guides. We just got Sigarden Savior, and I feel like this is a way that Wizards has been pushing white. So I feel like it's getting better at this, because Wizards went through that stage of like, we need card advantage of white, but we don't want to say draw a card on a white card. So they started making more like recur stuff from your graveyard style effects to try to get around that. And plus you got like Emiria Shepherd, you got literal Emiria. I think white's actually pretty good at getting graveyard
Dusk
value.
Dawn, how about a sweeper?
Yeah.
How about Marshall's Anthem? You want to just straight up reanimate creatures like out of the graveyard? Like, there's a lot of stuff in white.
It's pretty good.
White's better.
So much that you may not want to play Farewell.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. Also like Karmic Guide, Rivalark, these stuff are not only just good reanimation recursion, but they also can combo for ham sandwich. So they're not only just good utility, they can recur things, but they can also double as finishers, you know. So that's also something that's notable of them.
Like Seth said, this used to be White's card draw before Wizards started aggressively pushing for literal card draw, right? This is how you got cards, by getting them out of your graveyard.
Meanwhile, green is just drawing 15 cards for 3 mana or something. But
you do realize this is another category where blue is not only in last, but like way in last in a lot of our rankings, like several slots behind everything else.
What does blue have? Like Flashback, Snapcaster Mage, Torrential Gearhulk?
I'll go to bat for blue. I think blue has fine options, but they're mostly all like
name one.
Sorceries.
Name one.
Snapcaster Mage. Come on.
Okay, you can reuse
it's an ETB. You could bounce it back to your hand. Oh, remember how often
Archaeomancer.
Archaeomancer's like number one. Like how many times have we groaned when we saw Archaeomancer? Also,
combos.
Mystic Sanctuary. Mystic Sanctuary, another one to put stuff onto the top of your library. You can get artifacts back with Emery. That's cool, right? That's cool.
Every other color just like reanimated like 18 million cards, and then white is like one for one over here. I mean, sorry.
I still like my Diluvian Primordial. You get to reanimate instant sources from your opponent's graveyards.
That really counts.
Sort of.
No,
I don't know if that counts exactly, but
oh jeez,
blue just like it's so narrow. You can only really get back spells, and then I guess in some cases artifacts, but you can't get back creatures, which is kind of a big drawback. Like I think blue just literally does not have a card that can get a creature back from the graveyard, which is a problem. And I feel like a lot of the things that blue does, getting back spells, like red can do that too, but then it also gets like Underworld Breach and busted cards that do way more. So I don't know. I think maybe blue's just a bad color in Commander.
Is it really that bad? Are we missing something? Like, yeah, it's pretty bad, right?
I think I've always thought blue is just like really bad at recurring stuff outside of like Snapcaster or spells, but like in general,
so you don't need to recur. Like this whole category is a little sus, right? Like ramp and card draw is necessary. Recursion is just a form of card advantage, which
that's true.
You may not need, right? Like if you just drew a billion cards, you don't need to like pick things out of your graveyard for value, right? So it's not strictly needed. So, like a lot of times we don't play with graveyards whatsoever, right? Like you don't actually need it, right? So this is a nice to have, and we'll factor it into our rankings. But just because blue is horrendous at this doesn't mean... I would put this a lot less severe as blue being horrendous at ramp, which I think is critical to the game of Commander. Like, who cares if it can't recur, right?
It's not... I wouldn't weight it as high. Yeah. And also, like, you just put a Mystic Sanctuary in your deck and you're like, you're fine. You'll get the important board wipe you need or something back on top of your library. And
the blue board wipe, yes.
It's not...
Fade away! Nobody expects a second fadeaway.
No one expects the first fadeaway, Tomer, because no one should be playing it. I think even though recursion isn't essential, like you can build a deck without it, I do try to have at least one or two recursion spells in every deck. If you're someone who's just trying to build your commander decks, like I think there's a lot of value to it, even if you don't have a specific combo. Getting back your best card's a just inherently powerful thing to do. So not that blue needs to improve at it, but it is an important part of a lot of decks that I build, I would say.
Would you play a regrowth? A raw regrowth. Like, not Balagan Recovery.
In blue?
No. Just in green.
Oh. Well, no, I got Internal Witness. I don't need it.
But if it was in blue, would you play it?
Yes.
Let's say so you would play that.
Staple.
Well, blue has a lot of ways of doing that. Yeah. They have, like, Call to Mind and stuff. But
it only gets spells. Yeah. It only gets spells.
It only gets spells.
Like,
right?
it's still...
You get other things. Yeah.
I think I would play Regrowth in every blue deck if it was a blue card, just because blue doesn't have that effect.
Yeah, it would be your only way to get back, like, a creature you need or something, I guess.
I can see that.
The only other way is like there's like a bunch of cards to like shuffle your graveyard into your library,
and then just keep drawing cards, and you'll find it eventually.
And then keep drawing cards, and then you'll find it again.
we gotta put Mistveil Plains up there for white, then
Yeah, commit to memory though. Come on. All right. Okay, so recursion. It is nice to have, but like, blue. It's not the worst, but it's not the worst, I guess. Anyway, we'll move on to tutors. Tutors, we're going to define as basically just ways of searching your library for a specific card and putting it either onto the battlefield or onto your hand. Pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. Not too much contention here. Richard,
this one
what do you have for
blows my mind. Okay, so at S, I have black. I think everyone agrees black is undisputed.
Yeah.
At A, I have green, white, red. And then at B, I have blue. So I stop at B for tutors.
Wow, that's a lot different than my ranking.
Yeah,
I have...
blows my mind.
B...
I haven't grouped any of these.
I have black at S tier, and then nothing in A tier. In B tier, I have white and green. Nothing in C tier. In D tier, I have blue and red.
And then I don't like grouping stuff. These are all relative to me. I don't follow this whole grouping thing. I keep things nice and clean for each category. S is black, obviously. A, green. B is white. C is blue. And then finally at D is red. That's how I keep it simple, clean. And also Crim, by the way, kept it nice and clean too. Black at top, then green, then white, then red, and then finally blue.
Why is red so bad?
Because red... Okay, so what actually
are the red
tutors in red? You have Gamble, and you have...
Gamble.
And you have the 3-drop creature that's played in Legacy
Imperial
that gets a small...
Recruiter.
Imperial Recruiter,
That's
Goblin
it.
Welder.
No, Goblin Engineer.
Engineer,
Engineer,
okay.
whatever.
Tutor,
The
artifact to the
artifact.
graveyard,
Those
okay.
three.
Okay.
Yep. That's all you need to play.
Goblin Matron. You get goblins.
And Gamble carries the whole category. Like, Gamble's not. It's a one-mana tutor.
So, okay.
I refuse to play
And then
Gamble.
you have Recruiter for, like, edge cases, right? But I feel that should put it at least playable, right? Like, you will always play this if you want a tutor.
You would put red at A just because of Gamble. Just a single card. Gamble.
Gamble is unique.
It's at A.
I think it's
Gamble's
only
really good.
non-black card that can just tutor up anything, right? Like, it's either black
Then you
or
discard
Gamble.
it 9 times out of 10. You discard it, and then you cry.
There is risk. That's the red way.
Just like they might counterspell your spell. I don't know, man. Like, sometimes it doesn't work out, right? But mathematically, it's good, right?
So my argument for putting it so low was the lack of depth. Like, I agree that Gamble is just below the black tutors, essentially, in power level. Black gets to do it without any of the risk involved, but it's probably, outside of the black tutors, just the single best tutor in the format, because you can get any card. But beyond Gamble, the bench is pretty thin when it comes to red. You're really scraping around to, like, tutor up goblins. Recruiter can work in some decks. So the lack of depth is what had me ranking it so low. Compared to blue, is pretty narrow with its tutors, spells, and artifacts. It's pretty good at getting, but then it's not really good at finding creatures or other things. But there's a lot of them. There's a lot of ways to tutor up artifacts in blue. There's several ways to tutor up spells in blue. So I think that even though it's not as powerful as Gamble, there's a lot of them. And you're playing a commander deck. You got 100 singleton cards. You're not going to see that Gamble every game. Like, that's part of what makes red not that good, is you're not gonna see it. There's only one option.
Tomer, would you like to update the cast?
All right.
Your changes?
All right. I might have grouped one of them. I decided to bump
He's a
blue
grouper.
up to the white range and B. All right, I cheated. I feel bad. But I agree with Seth. So black, obviously, I don't think there's much of debate here. Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Grim Tutor. You can find whatever card you want. You can find whatever card you want, and at the most efficient rate, And there's extras even if you go into certain archetypes. Like, there's like the one that's it's a Demonic Tutor, but you have to sacrifice a creature. So you get even more. Yeah, so you get even more options there. And there's like a Spellslinger one and whatever. You get any card you want. That's huge. Green can find creatures. Green is really good at finding creatures. Guess what? The format is defined by creatures largely. That's what green wants to do. You got Survival of the Fittest. You got your Worldly Tutor. You got your Fauna Shaman. You got stuff that like looks for a mana value 6 or higher thing. You got Finale of Devastation. You got Green Sun Zenith. Like, you got stuff. You got tutors that are also finishers. It just happens. They do both. Why not? White got. I think it can get lands, kind of. Weathered Wayfarer, lane tax. I guess that's probably card advantage. You get Ranger of Eos. You can get 1 CMC stuff, which is narrow but sometimes work. You get Recruiter of the Guard, which is also like Imperial Recruiter, and then you have a bunch of ways that can find enchantments. Specifically auras. You get Enlightened Tutor. You get Idyllic Tutor. You get Heliod's Pilgrim. And then you also get ways of getting equipment. You get Open Armory, which also gets auras. Steel Shaper's Gift.
Stoneforge.
So there's like a lot. Yeah.
What does Thalia's Lancers do? Is it Planeswalkers?
Thalia's gets a legendary.
Legendaries? You can tutor
Druid.
or something. Like, you can tutor literally everything.
Yeah. It's like 5
with
mana.
white, except you need a different card for each thing you want to tutor, right?
Yeah,
But the color itself has access to tutoring basically everything.
And we forgot also the Rectors, like Academy Rector, Arena Rector, really strong in the right decks too. Tutoring right to the battlefield is like ramp plus tutoring essentially.
Yeah. And I think blue's actually quite good too. Like, blue's really good at finding sorcerers and instants. So Mystical Tutor is obviously really good, but then like Solve the Equation, 3 mana. It's like a Grim Tutor for your instant sorceries.
Transmute.
Then there's like Spell Seeker. Yeah, transmute spells. You could discard them and find same mana value. And then it's also really good at artifacts. I would say the best color ad tutoring up artifacts outside of black, I guess. Black's cheating though. You got the Trinket Mage, the Tribute Mage, the Trophy Mage.
Fabricate.
You got Whir of Invention. You can instant speed put an artifact from your library directly onto the battlefield, and it has Improvise, which is bananas, and Anchor to the Reality, like so much. So if you're an artifact deck, you're so happy. What?
Tinker is so good that it's banned.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Tinker's
now it's 4 mana.
busted.
Tinker is fine. So yeah, but then red just has like 3 cards, and I think one of them is the only one that's like generic.
And it's the best one of all time.
I refuse to play it every single time. I just
That's why I'm
discard it.
surprised you guys
play
have things
it.
hanging around in D and C. I think all these tutors are actually very
It's like
strong.
Chaos Warp. Gamble is like Chaos Warp to me. I acknowledge that it's a good card. I refuse to play it.
What's farther ahead, green at ramping or black at tutoring? Compared to the rest of the colors.
Green at ramping.
Green,
at
everyone else
ramping.
can ramp. Everyone else
Yeah.
can tutor by this list here, right?
Well, everyone else
Yeah.
ramp. We had everyone else had some ramp. We got our high tides and our cartographer's hawks. Everyone's ramping in their own way.
So there's a difference between those ramps, right? Like they're fragile, or you have to use it all at once. This is like straight tutoring. Everyone can tutor with the same card in the hand, right? And it's in your hand. It's good to go. Plus, tutoring is not as important. Like we shy away from tutors because it kind of makes the game a little boring. You don't actually need a tutor; it just makes your deck more consistent. But you do need ramp, right? So if you feel red doesn't have access to tutors, I don't think that like shuts off your game plan or anything, right? But if you don't have access to any ramp, you're kind of doing nothing and dirtling around, right? So
Yeah,
you can kind of offset tutoring by just drawing more cards because it increases the likelihood of you
or
finding
play
it. But
more
you need to draw cards
copies
either
of
way.
whatever you're trying to play, right?
Yeah, you need to draw cards because you need to keep hitting your land drops. You need to recover from board wipes and stuff like that. You need to have constantly cards being refilled. Whereas tutoring it's good. It speeds things up and it enables game plans, like specific combos, for example. Like combo decks will want tutors a little bit higher, but not all decks are combo decks.
Yeah, I've cut down on my tutors a ton. I used to play a lot of them, but I definitely agree. They're not essential, and then Commander might actually be better without them. Also, y'all had green rank pretty highly. You're not including stuff that tutors lands, right? Like not Rampant Growth or Kadama's Reach. So even though they're technically tutoring, we're not counting them as far as tutors
Green can
in our
only tutor
rankings.
creatures.
And
Well, Green
lands.
can tutor lands to like Sylvan Scrying.
Yeah.
Because it puts it any land for 2 mana. So that's your expedition map, which for 1 mana discount, I guess.
Hour
And there's like
of Promise does the
Nylea's
same
Intervention.
thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like you can tutor
Nylea's-
utility lands, which makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
You're not tutoring just basics. So you can bring up
Yeah.
utility lands, but just the raw, like green has a creature for everything. So it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You can Green Sun Zenith into removal, into artifact destruction or something, into card draw. Like you can Green Sun
Life
Zenith into
gain.
anything you want, ramp if you want. Just not a sweeper, I guess, right? So
You get Finale of Devastation into a win condition.
Yeah,
just
like, it is your win
Finale of
con, right?
Devastation. Just like,
so
oops,
yeah,
a daisy.
green is pretty strong.
Yeah, we don't play Survival of the Fittest that often, but it is one of the most powerful cards in the format, I think.
Survive Tooth and Nail.
Ooh.
Tooth and Nail,
Tooth and
Mike
Nail
and
gets
Trike,
there, yeah.
immediately win.
Yeah, green is
pretty good.
definitely good. That's for sure.
It's pretty, yeah. Pretty
I feel this is the only category where I can say all colors are good with a straight face.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing severely lacking or anything.
Yeah.
Red could use some more, I think. I'm still on the red needs, could use some more, but
of-
otherwise.
How many
What type of
tutors do
red
you actually
tutor would you
play?
look for?
That's my question. Like you just play 1 or 2. Gamble fills. You don't need depth if you have a gamble, right? If you don't own a gamble, you're out of luck, right? But if you own a gamble, you're like that's the tutor slot. I'm done.
I'm curious how much normal people play. I've ended up cutting a ton of tutors from when I used to play, so now I usually play 1. But I used to, when I first started playing Commander, I would have like 6 or as many as I could fit because I wanted to be able to find whatever card I wanted and make sure I had that consistency. I'm honestly curious if you're watching this someplace where you can comment. How many tutors do you put in your decks? Like, I don't know if I'm the exception to the rule, playing like 0 to 1 tutors, and everyone else is playing 5 or as many as they can, or if I'm the norm and most people don't play many tutors in their deck.
I feel we play less tutors over time because we have too many staples now. So back in the day, there were like a handful of staples, and you needed to tutor them up so your deck would be functional. But now you have so many staples that it doesn't really matter for you to tutor. And when I'm tutoring, I'm trying to tutor like my hidden commander up or something. Like I have a 1-of card in my deck that I need my deck built around. But like a value tutor isn't as common anymore because all of my cards are really good and they all do things due to power creep, like all the support cards. So
wow, that's
also
a good point. Because really, a tutor is essentially just adding attacks to the spell that you want. When you really think about it, like you're getting the spell you want, but you're paying more mana. And if all your cards are good, why pay the tax if you can just draw and cast all your good cards?
Like every card is good. You don't need to tutor anything, right? Just play any card in your deck, right? Yeah, like whatever, it's fine, right?
For me, at least, I think I add tutors into my deck once I played a couple times, because at the beginning, I don't really know which cards. Like, I have a good idea of which card, like, the deck is good, but to fine-tune the deck, I might play a card and realize it's not that good, and there's a similar card in the deck that does the same thing for redundancy, and I'm like, well, this card's bad, and I generally just want to find this card because this card's really good. So I'll replace the bad card with the tutor, but it requires playtesting on my part. So eventually, like my most tuned decks usually have 1 or 2 tutors added to the deck after fine-tuning it a bit. Whereas, for Commander Clash, this is the first time and only time I'm playing a deck. So I'm not going to like cut these cool quirky cards because, I want to see them in play first before I cut them and start adding tutors to find the good ones.
The first card to cut when you're over, and it's the first card to add when you're under.
Yeah, might as well.
True. Yeah, true. And if you're comboed, then you like tutoring a little bit more, but like, we don't know about that much. All right, so we covered tutors, we covered recursion, we covered card draw, we covered ramp. We still have a lot of categories to go. Next podcast, I suppose, or next time we pick this topic up, I suppose, we're going to be covering removal and other unique stuff like protection and whatnot to kind of round out a deck and round out the strengths or weaknesses of the colors. So, that's where we're going to end it. Let us know how you like this style of podcast. We haven't really done something like this before. What do you think of our definitions of the aspects of the decks that we covered so far? And, if there were any critical cards for each color that we were talking about and analyzing, if there was something we missed, we should have maybe evaluated the categories a little bit different, how you would evaluate them. And then also for next time we're picking it up, what categories do you think we should be covering? We're going to have like removal, each kind of removal, unique stuff like protection spells and whatnot. Is there anything big that you think we should cover? Let us know in the comments section below. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this sort of stuff. And until next time, friends, see ya!